The council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive station that had witnessed 1,000 years of peace. Today it witnessed only terror. Ambassador Veltara stood before the holographic display, her crystalline body trembling as another star system vanished from the map. 3 worlds, billions of lives, gone in less than an hour. How many does that make? Asked Council Leader Mordan, his voice barely a whisper. 712 systems lost, Veltara replied. Her voice cracked like breaking glass. The Voidborn consumed them all. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 847 species watched in silence. Some wept, others simply stared. They had tried everything. Their greatest scientists had built weapons that could crack planets. Their most powerful fleets had thrown 1 million ships at the enemy. Nothing worked. The Voidborn just kept coming, an endless tide of darkness that ate everything in its path. The enemy had appeared 6 months ago, pouring through a rift in space that should not exist. They were creatures of pure hunger, things that fed on matter and energy alike. They had no culture, no language, no mercy. They simply consumed. When they finished with a world, nothing remained but a cold, dead husk floating in space. Veltara had seen the recordings. She wished she hadn't. The Voidborn didn't kill quickly. They took their time, draining worlds layer by layer while populations screamed and ran with nowhere to go. The Concordate's weapons barely scratched them. Antimatter bombs that should vaporize mountains just made them pause for a moment. Energy shields meant nothing. The creatures adapted to every weapon, learned from every tactic, and came back stronger. We're losing 3 systems per day now, said Thexel, a Quilon diplomat with 4 arms that he wrung together nervously. At this rate, the core worlds have less than 2 months. 2 months until the heart of galactic civilization died. 2 months until 400 billion souls faced extinction. The chamber fell silent again. What could anyone say? They had already thrown everything at the problem. There was nothing left. There might be one option, said historian Kelnva, an ancient being who rarely spoke in council. But you won't like it. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. She moved slowly to the central display and pulled up a file. The moment it appeared, warning symbols flashed in 17 languages. Red text scrolled across the screen. Quarantine zone. Do not contact. Extreme hazard. 600 years ago, we made first contact with a species on the edge of the galaxy, Kelnva said. We called them humans. They lived on a planet we designated as a Class 12 death world. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Class 12 was the highest danger rating. Worlds where everything tried to kill you. Extreme gravity, toxic atmosphere, deadly predators, constant natural disasters. Only the most aggressive, violent species could evolve in such hell. The humans were everything we feared, Kelnva continued. Aggressive, violent. They had just developed faster than light travel and had already fought 3 wars among themselves. Our contact team was terrified of them. The humans had weapons designed to kill their own kind in the millions. They had literally split atoms to make bombs. Their entire history was written in blood. So we quarantined them, Veltara said. She knew this story. Every child in the Concordate learned it as a cautionary tale. We locked them in their own system and told them to stay away from civilized space. Yes, Kelnva said. We decided they were too dangerous to join the galaxy. Too violent. Too unpredictable. We left them alone and hoped they would destroy themselves. What does this have to do with our current situation? Demanded Mordan. Kelnva looked at him with her old, tired eyes. We quarantined them because we thought they were monsters. Creatures born from a nightmare world, shaped by endless violence and death. We were afraid of what they might do to the galaxy. She paused. Perhaps it's time we found out. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted over each other. The idea was insane. Humans were savages, barbarians, devils from a hell planet. Releasing them would be like opening a second front in a war they were already losing. But Veltara stared at the map, watching another system blink out of existence. She thought about the children on those worlds. The families, the dreams that would never be fulfilled. The Voidborn were killing everything and the Concordate had no answer. We're already dying, she said quietly. The chamber slowly fell silent. Every day, billions of our people are slaughtered. Our weapons don't work. Our tactics fail. We're fighting an enemy we can't beat. She turned to face the council. If we do nothing, we're extinct in 2 months. If we contact the humans and they turn on us, we're extinct in 2 months. At least this way we tried something different. Morden looked around the chamber. He saw fear in every face, but he also saw something else, desperation, hope however slim. Very well, he said. Send a ship to Earth, one ship. Tell them what we face. Ask for their help. He paused, and pray we're not making an even worse mistake. 3 days later, the scout ship Whisper of Mercy jumped into the quarantine zone. Its crew of 12 was terrified. They were flying into the home system of the galaxy's most feared species, to ask those monsters for help against an even greater nightmare. The ship's captain, a young Sivathi named Kellen, stared at the blue-green planet on his screen. Earth, the death world. He wondered if his crew would survive long enough to deliver their message. He wondered if anyone would survive what came next. The Whisper of Mercy dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the orbit of Mars. Captain Kellen expected to find a primitive world, maybe a few dozen ships at most. What he found instead made his crystalline body go rigid with shock. The Sol system was alive with activity. Massive orbital stations circled Earth like a crown of steel and light. Dozens of cylinder habitats spun slowly in the void, each one home to millions. The moon wasn't gray anymore. It was covered in domes and structures, glittering in the sunlight. Mars had cities, actual cities visible from space. And everywhere there were ships. Contact in 3 seconds, said his navigator, voice tight with fear. A warship appeared beside them. It was huge, easily 5 times the size of the Whisper of Mercy. Its hull was dark gray, covered in weapons that Kellen didn't recognize. The ship moved with frightening grace, sliding into position to block any escape route. Unidentified vessel, this is UESC Indomitable. You have entered United Earth Space Command territory. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. The voice was female, calm, professional. It spoke in perfect concordate standard, which shouldn't be possible. Kellen's crew looked at him with terrified eyes. He took a breath, or what passed for breathing in his species, and opened a channel. This is Captain Kellen of the concordate scout ship Whisper of Mercy. We come in peace. We have an urgent message for humanity. There was a pause. Then the voice replied, Stand by, Captain. We're sending a shuttle. 20 minutes later, Kellen stood in his own cargo bay, watching as 3 humans stepped off their shuttle. They wore dark blue uniforms with insignia he couldn't read. The leader was a woman with brown skin and close-cropped black hair. She moved with the easy confidence of a predator, and Kellen had to fight the urge to step back. Captain Kellen, she said, extending a hand. I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the Indomitable. Welcome to the Sol system. Kellen stared at the hand. He knew what this was. A human greeting. Slowly, carefully, he extended one of his own limbs and touched her palm. Her grip was firm but not crushing. Her skin was warm. You speak our language, he said. We've been listening to concordate broadcasts for 600 years, Chen replied. We know a lot about you. She paused. You look scared, Captain. Are we that frightening? You're from a death world, Kellen said quietly. Your planet would kill my entire crew in minutes. Your gravity alone would crush us. Your people evolved by fighting and killing everything around you. Yes, Captain Chen, you frighten me very much. Something flickered across Chen's face. Pain, maybe? Or sadness. I see the quarantine taught you well. She gestured to a table. Please sit. Tell me why you're here. It must be important for the concordate to break 600 years of silence. Kellen told her everything. He showed her the recordings of worlds being consumed, the spreading darkness, the millions of ships they'd lost, the billions of dead. As he spoke, he watched Chen's expression change. The professional mask cracked, revealing something underneath. Anger. No, not anger. Fury. When he finished, Chen was silent for a long moment. Then she said, You came here because you're desperate. Because everything else failed. We're your last option. Yes, Kellen admitted. I'm sorry. I know you must hate us. We called you monsters. We locked you away. We know, Chen interrupted. We've known for 600 years. Do you know what that did to us, Captain? To discover we weren't alone in the universe, only to be told we were too violent, too dangerous, too broken to join the galactic community. She stood and walked to a viewport, staring out at Earth. But we didn't give up. We kept building, kept growing, kept listening to your broadcasts, watching your culture, learning everything we could. And for the last 3 months, we've been listening to you die. Kellen felt his core go cold. You knew? You knew we were being slaughtered and you did nothing? Chen turned back to him. We did everything, Captain. We've been preparing. Do you think this fleet was built by accident? We've been mobilizing for weeks, waiting for you to ask, waiting for you to realize that maybe the monsters you feared were exactly what you needed. She tapped a control on her wrist. A hologram appeared showing hundreds of ships, thousands. We can have 15,000 warships ready in 72 hours. 2 million ground troops. Full support and logistics. We'll need coordinates to your front lines and any intelligence you have on the enemy. Kellen couldn't speak. 15,000 ships. The Concordat had taken months to gather their million-ship fleet. Humans were offering 15,000 in 3 days. Why? He finally asked. After everything we did to you, why help us? Chen smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. Because that's what humans do, Captain. We're violent, yes. We're aggressive. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to fight, to adapt, to survive no matter what. But we also learned something else. She placed her hand over her heart. We learned to protect those who can't protect themselves. You called us monsters. Maybe you're right. But we're your monsters now. 2 days later, Kellen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as the human fleet prepared to jump. 15,000 warships, just as Chen had promised. They hung in space like a storm about to break. Weapons armed, crews ready. Around him, human officers worked with calm efficiency, calling out status reports and coordinates. All ships report ready, Captain, said the tactical officer. Chen looked at Kellen. Last chance to change your mind, Captain. Once we commit, we're all in. Humans don't do half measures. Kellen thought about the Concordat, about the worlds already lost, about the billions waiting to die. Take us to war, Captain Chen. Chen nodded. All ships, this is Commodore Chen. 600 years ago, the galaxy decided humanity was too dangerous to join them. Today, we're going to prove them right. But we're not bringing destruction. We're bringing salvation. Navigation, jump the fleet. Let's go save the galaxy. The stars stretched into lines of light. Space twisted, and 15,000 human warships vanished into the void, racing toward a war they hadn't started but fully intended to finish. The human fleet arrived at Kreshnala system to find a graveyard. 17. Concordat species had made their stand here 3 weeks ago. Debris from thousands of ships floated in the void like snow. And in the center of it all, feeding on the remains, were the Voidborn. Thexel stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, his forearms gripping the railing as he stared at the creatures that had killed his people. They looked wrong. Not like living things, but like holes in space shaped into something that moved, dark forms that seemed to pull in light and sound and hope itself. Tactical count? Chen asked, her voice calm. Reading 300,000 Voidborn ships, the officer replied. They're moving to intercept. 300,000. The human fleet numbered 15,000. 20-to-1 odds. Thexal waited for Chen to order a retreat, to call for reinforcements, to do anything sensible. Instead, she smiled. All ships, this is Chen. Remember your training. Remember why we're here. These things killed billions of innocent people. They're going to learn what happens when you mess with someone humanity decides to protect. She paused. Weapons free. Show them what a Deathworld species can do. The human fleet didn't move like any military Thexal had seen before. Concordat fleet stayed in formation, fought with honor, tried to minimize casualties. The humans scattered like a swarm, each ship moving independently but somehow perfectly coordinated, and then they opened fire. Thexal watched in horror as nuclear weapons lit up space. Dozens of them. Hundreds. The humans were using atomic bombs like regular ammunition. Missiles streaked through the void, each one carrying enough explosive power to level a city. Kinetic weapons, simple chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds, punched through Voidborn ships like they were paper. What are they doing? Thexal whispered. Those weapons are banned by 7 different treaties. They're effective, Chen said quietly. We didn't sign those treaties, Ambassador. And right now, I don't care about fighting fair. I care about winning. A Voidborn ship broke through the human line, heading straight for the Indomitable. Before Thexal could even shout a warning, 3 human destroyers rammed it. Just rammed it. Their ships smashing into the enemy at full speed. All 3 human ships exploded. The Voidborn ship broke apart. Did they just... Thexal couldn't finish the sentence and sacrifice themselves to protect us? Chen finished. Yes, that's what humans do. She didn't look away from the battle. Every person on those ships knew what they were signing up for. We don't waste lives, Ambassador, but we won't let fear stop us from doing what's necessary. The battle raged for 3 hours. Thexal watched humans fight with a ferocity he'd never imagined. They used weapons the Concordat had abandoned as too brutal. They set traps, used deception, attacked from unexpected angles. One human ship pretended to be damaged, and when Voidborn surrounded it, the ship exploded in a blast that took out 50 enemy vessels. And slowly, impossibly, the humans started winning. The Voidborn adapted just like they always did, but humans adapted faster. Every time the enemy figured out a tactic, the humans changed it. They were unpredictable, aggressive, and absolutely relentless. When the last Voidborn ship in orbit was destroyed, Chen didn't celebrate. Ground forces are landing on Kreshnala Prime. The Voidborn are trying to consume the civilian population. All Marine units deploy immediately. Thexal accompanied the Marines to the surface. He had to see this for himself. The planet was a nightmare. The atmosphere was full of toxic ash from the battle. Radiation levels were dangerously high. The temperature was 40 degrees below freezing. It was hell. The humans stepped out of their shuttles like they were taking a walk. They wore armor, yes, but they moved easily, comfortably. One of them, a massive man named Sergeant Rodriguez, noticed Thexal struggling in his environmental suit. "You okay, Ambassador?" Rodriguez asked. His voice was concerned, gentle even. "This place would kill me in seconds without this suit," Thexal said. "How are you not dying?" Rodriguez laughed. This is nothing. I'm from Colorado. We trained in Alaska, Antarctica, the Sahara, the Mariana Trench. You learn to fight in hell, everywhere else feels easy." He checked his rifle. "Come on, we've got civilians to save." Thexal followed the Marines into the ruins of a city. Thousands of Kreshnalan civilians huddled in shelters waiting to die. The Voidborn were coming. Dark shapes flowing through the streets like living shadows. The humans attacked without hesitation. They moved through the toxic atmosphere like it was nothing, fighting in conditions that would kill any Concordat soldier. They used fire, something the Concordat considered too primitive for modern warfare. But the Voidborn, creatures of dark energy, burned. Thexal watched Rodriguez kick down a door and pull out a family of terrified aliens. The big human knelt down to their level, his voice soft despite the weapons fire around them. "It's okay. You're safe now. We're going to get you out of here." The alien child, no bigger than Thexal's hand, reached out and touched Rodriguez's helmet. "Are you angels?" Rodriguez laughed, a warm sound that seemed wrong in this place of death. "No, kid. We're just humans. But we're going to make sure you see your family again. I promise." He kept that promise. The Marines held the line for 8 hours, fighting in conditions that should have been impossible, until every single civilian was evacuated. 20,000 civilians saved. But the cost made Thexal weep. 2,000 Marines dead. 5,000 wounded. Rodriguez was among them, killed by a Voidborn that got too close while he was protecting a group of children. That night, on the Indomitable, Thexal found Chen staring at a list of names. The dead. She looked tired, older somehow. "You won," Thexal said quietly. "You saved them all." "Not all," Chen replied. "I lost 2,000 people today. 2,000 humans who had families, dreams, lives ahead of them. Rodriguez was going to retire next year. Did you know that? He was going to open a restaurant. Then why?" Thexal asked. "Why fight if the cost is so high?" Chen looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. "Because the cost of not fighting is higher. Because those 20,000 civilians deserve to live. Because someone has to stand between the darkness and the innocent." She turned back to the list. "We're monsters, Ambassador. Your people were right about that. But we're monsters who protect instead of prey. And sometimes the galaxy needs monsters on its side." Thexal looked out at the stars where human ships patrolled the darkness. For the first time in months, he felt something he'd thought was lost forever. Hope. The emergency council meeting was chaos. Representatives from 100 species shouted over each other in the virtual chamber. The humans had won at Kreshnala, yes, but their methods had horrified half the Concordat. Nuclear weapons, ramming attacks, soldiers fighting in toxic environments. It was barbaric. It was brutal. It was everything civilized species had evolved beyond. General Marcus Okonkwo stood in the center of the chamber, his dark skin and gray hair making him look like carved stone. He waited patiently for the shouting to die down, his hands clasped behind his back. When silence finally fell, he spoke in a voice that carried absolute authority. You're upset because we fight dirty, because we use weapons you've banned, because we sacrifice our own people to win. He looked around the chamber. You're right to be upset. What we do is ugly. War is ugly. But you know what's uglier? Losing. Dying. Watching your worlds burn while you debate the proper ethics of self-defense. A Mathali representative, their insectoid body clicking with agitation, spoke up. You used atomic weapons in atmosphere. The radiation will poison that world for generations. Yes, Okonkwo agreed, it will. And if we hadn't, the Voidborn would have consumed every living thing on that planet in 3 days. The Kreshnalans now have a contaminated world. But they have a world. They have their lives. They can rebuild. You can't rebuild if you're dead. But the cost, protested a Savathi elder. 2,000 of your own dead. Doesn't that matter to you? Okonkwo's expression hardened. Every single one of those deaths matters to me. I wrote letters to their families. I looked at their pictures. I memorized their names. Sergeant Luis Rodriguez, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, Private First Class James Chen. His voice cracked slightly. They were my responsibility and I sent them to die. Don't you dare tell me their deaths don't matter. The chamber fell silent. Okonkwo took a breath and continued. Here's what you need to understand about humans. We're from a world that tried to kill us every day. Our own planet weaponized everything against us. The weather, the animals, the bacteria, even the ground beneath our feet would shake and try to swallow us. We learned to fight back. We learned that survival means accepting risk, accepting loss, accepting that sometimes you have to make terrible choices. He pulled up a hologram, showing the Concordate's military doctrine. You fight to minimize casualties, to preserve ships, to follow rules of engagement that make war civilized. Those are good goals, noble goals, but they only work when both sides follow the same rules. The hologram shifted to show the Voidborn. Your enemy doesn't care about rules. They don't take prisoners. They don't accept surrender. They just consume. You can't fight that with honor. You can only fight it with absolute commitment to survival. This is the Deathworld doctrine, Okonkwo continued. We accept that war costs lives. We accept that winning means sacrifice. We don't waste our people. But we won't let fear of loss stop us from doing what must be done. You wanted our help because we're monsters. Well, this is what monsters look like when they're on your side. Thexal stood up, his forearms raised for attention. General, I've fought beside your people. I've watched them die to save strangers. But the Concordate needs to understand something. He turned to face his fellow representatives. Humans aren't monsters. Monsters don't cry for their dead. Monsters don't make friends with the people they're protecting. Monsters don't teach alien children how to play their games while bombs fall around them. He pulled up images from Krishnala, human soldiers sharing food with civilians, medics treating wounded aliens before treating their own people, Rodriguez kneeling to comfort a terrified child minutes before he died. Yes, humans fight with brutal efficiency. Yes, they use terrible weapons, but they fight for us. They die for us. They asked for nothing in return except the coordinates to save more lives. Thexal's voice rose with passion. We quarantined them because we were afraid. Now they're saving us because they're brave. Perhaps it's time we learned from them instead of judging them. The council dissolved in heated debate, but intelligence arrived that ended all discussion. A message from the front lines. The Voidborn had stopped their scattered attacks. They were converging. Every single Voidborn ship in the galaxy was heading toward one location, the core worlds. The heart of Concordate civilization. Home to 400 billion souls, how long do we have? Asked Council Leader Morden, his voice barely a whisper. 2 weeks until they arrive, the intelligence officer reported. Maybe 3 if we're lucky. We need 3 weeks to move the fleet into position, someone said. We can't possibly get there in time. Okonkwo and Chen exchanged glances. Chen stepped forward. We can do it in 12 days, she said. Impossible, Mordan replied. Even with your faster engines, the distance is too great. We'll use jump cascading, Okonkwo explained. Multiple faster-than-light jumps in rapid succession. It's dangerous. The stress on ships and crews is extreme. We estimate a 15% casualty rate just from the journey. The council erupted again. 15% losses before even reaching the battle? It was suicide. You have a better option? Chen asked coldly. Because sitting here debating while 400 billion people wait to die isn't one. She pulled up tactical displays. We don't have time for safe. We don't have time for careful. We have 12 days to cross 800 light years and prepare for the largest battle in galactic history. So you have two choices. Come with us and risk the journey, or stay here and explain to the survivors why you didn't try. 3 days later, the combined fleet began the jump cascade. Human ships led the way, their crews strapped in and ready for the brutal journey. Concordate ships followed, trusting their fate to the Deathworld species they'd once feared. The first jump was manageable. The second was painful. By the fifth, crew members were passing out from the stress. By the eighth, ships were reporting system failures. By the 12th jump, 3 human cruisers and 7 concordate vessels had been destroyed by the sheer physics of what they were attempting. But on the 12th day, the fleet arrived at the core worlds. Battered, exhausted, but ready to fight. 2 million concordate ships already waited in orbit, the last defense of civilization. The humans had brought 15,000, against an enemy that would arrive in 2 days with millions of ships, maybe tens of millions. Thexel stood beside Chen on the bridge of the Indomitable, now promoted to Commodore for her actions at Kreshnala. Outside the viewport, the 7 suns of the core cluster burned bright. Beautiful, peaceful. For now. We can't win this, Thexel said quietly. Even with everything we have, the numbers are impossible. Chen pulled up a tactical plan labeled the Gambit in human script. We're not going to fight them. Not the way they expect. We're going to save everyone we can and make the Voidborn pay for every inch of space they take. And then we're going to close the door on them forever. How? Thexel asked. Chen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The same way we do everything, Ambassador. We're going to give them hell. The Voidborn arrived like a dark tide. Sensors couldn't count them all. Millions of ships, maybe tens of millions, blotting out the stars themselves. They moved as one massive organism, flowing toward the core worlds with absolute certainty. Space itself seemed to darken in their presence. On the command deck of the Indomitable, Commodore Chen watched the enemy approach. Around her, representatives from every major concordate species stood silent. They all knew what was coming. This was where civilization made its last stand. Begin Operation Sanctuary, Chen ordered. Across the system, human ships moved into position, but not to fight, not yet. They formed a corridor, a protected channel leading away from the core worlds. Thousands of civilian transports began streaming through, carrying millions of refugees, children, families, the old and sick. Everyone who couldn't fight was evacuated. We can't save them all, Thexel said, watching the endless line of transports. 400 billion people, even working at maximum capacity. They could only evacuate a fraction. No, Chen agreed. But we'll save everyone we can. The Gambit isn't about winning the battle, Ambassador. It's about making sure something survives. The Voidborn reached weapons range. The Concordate fleet opened fire first. 2 million ships unleashing everything they had. Energy beams, missiles, kinetic weapons. The Void lit up like a second sun. For a moment, Thexel dared to hope. Then the Voidborn fired back. The Concordate's front line simply ceased to exist. 50,000 ships gone in seconds. The enemy didn't slow down. All human ships, Chen's voice carried across the fleet, calm despite the hell breaking loose around them. Remember why we're here. Every second we hold this line is 1,000 more lives evacuated. Every ship we destroy is 100 fewer attacking the transports. We're not here to survive. We're here to protect. Make every shot count. Human ships plunged into the enemy formation like spears. They fought with the same brutal efficiency Thexel had seen at Kreshnala, but multiplied 1,000 times. Nuclear weapons lit up space. Ships rammed enemies when they ran out of ammunition. One human captain, her destroyer crippled and burning, directed her ship straight into a Voidborn command vessel, screaming defiance over open channels until the explosion consumed them both. The Concordate species, watching humans fight with such fierce determination, found something awakening in themselves. The Sivathi, whose crystalline ships were considered too beautiful to damage, began using them as kinetic weapons. The Quilon revealed hidden weapon systems they deemed too cruel for civilized warfare. The Mithali, a hive species that valued every individual life, began coordinating suicide runs against enemy command nodes. For the first time in the war, the galaxy fought like Deathworlders. The battle raged for 36 hours. Thexel stopped counting losses after the first day. Human ships were dying by the hundreds, Concordate vessels by the thousands. But the evacuation corridor held. The transports kept moving. Every minute, more lives were saved. Commodore, the tactical officer, called out, "We've evacuated 392 billion civilians. 98% successful evacuation." Chen closed her eyes for a moment. 392 billion. 8 billion hadn't made it. 8 billion dead or dying, trapped on worlds the Voidborn would consume. It was the greatest evacuation in galactic history. It was also the greatest failure. "Execute final phase," Chen ordered. 30 human colony ships, empty of civilians but filled with antimatter, jumped into the heart of the Voidborn fleet. They weren't warships. They were slow, clumsy, designed for peaceful transport. The enemy ignored them, focusing on the military vessels. That was their mistake. The ships detonated simultaneously. Each one carried enough antimatter to destroy a small moon. Together they tore holes in space-time itself. The Voidborn fleet, so tightly packed, couldn't escape. Millions of enemy vessels were caught in the cascading explosions. The dark tide broke. For the first time, the Voidborn formation scattered in confusion. Now, Okonkwo's voice thundered across the fleet. "All ships target the rift. Hit it with everything we have!" The dimensional rift, the wound in space that the Voidborn had poured through, had been their target all along. While the fleet fought and died, human engineers had been positioning weapons around it. Devices built from technology the Concordat had abandoned as too dangerous. Weapons that could collapse space-time itself. Every surviving ship fired at once. The rift shuddered. The Voidborn, sensing what was happening, tried to retreat back through it, but Chen had saved one last trick. Activate the Hellfire protocol. Around the rift, hidden mines detonated. Not normal explosives, but weapons that destabilized the very fabric of reality. The rift began to collapse. Voidborn ships, trapped between the collapsing portal and the Allied fleet, were crushed out of existence. The dark tide was sucked back into whatever hell dimension it came from. With a final flash of light, the rift sealed. Space itself scarred over the wound, leaving an area of distorted space-time that would remain dangerous for 1,000 years. But the Voidborn were gone, sealed away, defeated. The Allied fleet floated in the aftermath of the greatest battle in galactic history. Of the 2 million Concordat ships, less than 400,000 remained. Of the 15,000 human vessels, fewer than 9,000 survived. The casualties were beyond counting, but 400 billion civilians were safe. The galaxy was saved. 6 months later, Thexal stood on Earth for the first time. The quarantine was officially dissolved. Humanity was invited to join the Concordat, not as junior members but as protectors of the galaxy. A monument was being dedicated today, a massive wall of black stone with names inscribed in light. Every human who died in the war. All 800,000 names. Chen stood beside him, no longer in uniform. She'd resigned her commission, saying she'd seen enough war for one lifetime. Her daughter, a bright-eyed 8-year-old named Maya, held her hand. "Did you really save everyone, Mom?" Maya asked, looking up at the monument. Chen knelt down to her daughter's level. "No, baby. We couldn't save everyone, but we saved everyone we could. Sometimes that's all you can do." Maya thought about this for a moment, then hugged her mother tightly. "The other kids at school said you're a hero." "I'm not a hero," Chen said softly. "The heroes are up there." She pointed at the names on the wall. "They gave everything so others could live. All I did was make sure their sacrifice mattered." Thexal watched as representatives from 847 species gathered around the monument. Each one placed a token from their world at the base. Flowers, crystals, carved stones, offerings to the humans who'd died for people they'd never met. A Crescenalan family approached Chen. The mother carried a small child, the same one Rodriguez had saved before he died. She spoke no English, but she didn't need to. She simply placed her hand over her heart, then over Chen's in a gesture of eternal gratitude. That night, Thexal stood on a balcony overlooking Earth's cities. The planet was beautiful, this death world that had forged the galaxy's greatest protectors. He thought about the war, the losses, the victory, the terrible price of survival. A young human joined him, a lieutenant he'd fought beside. She looked up at the stars, where human ships now patrolled alongside Concordat vessels, keeping watch over a grateful galaxy. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked. "The Voidborn." Thexal looked at the ships overhead. At the monument to the fallen, at the galaxy that had once feared humanity and now owed them everything. "If they do," he said quietly, They'll find the galaxy isn't alone anymore. They'll find species who learn to fight like Deathworlders. They'll find courage where there was once fear. And they'll find humanity standing guard, protecting those who can't protect themselves. The lieutenant smiled. Good, because that's what we do best. Across the galaxy on 1,000 worlds, children looked up at the night sky. They saw human ships keeping watch, silhouettes against the stars, the monsters that had become guardians, the Deathworlders who'd answered the galaxy's final SOS and saved civilization itself. And in the darkness between stars, where the rift had been sealed, space remained quiet. The Voidborn were gone, but if they ever returned, they would find something worse than monsters waiting for them. They would find monsters who protect, and there's nothing in the universe more dangerous than that.